Hi, everybody. How we doing? I love to see a sea of green out there. Let's see. I'm going to hand these to the woman behind the curtain. Dun, da, da, magic. I'm going to put my water bottles there. Okay, I'm so excited to be here with you all today. And we're coming up on a great and amazing anniversary celebration. Very exciting. Before I begin, I need to thank the founder and president of the National First Ladies Library, Museum and Historic Site, Mrs. Mary Regula, and all the wonderful staff members who help her here, including Martha Regula and Lucinda Fraley, and the woman behind the curtain there, that was Michelle Gullion. So thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for all the work it takes to bring a speaker. It's not an inconsiderable task. So, every Girl Scout has her own understanding of Juliet Gordon Low, and the rest of the world have never heard of her. Today, I want to try to talk a little bit about her life, just to give you the encapsulated biography of her, concentrating on the big topics, I think, today. And then there'll be at least one slide in there for Girl Scouts, because I know that when I speak to audiences about Juliet Low, I have to split the difference between those who know nothing about her and those who know a lot about her. All right, so here we go. Juliet, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Jeremy, Jeremy, we're not going. Ha! There we go. Thanks, Jeremy. Juliet Gordon Low founded the most important organization for girls and women in the history of this nation. And yet, if I put this picture up in front of a room that doesn't have a sea of green, no one will be able to identify her. I find that stunning and not so good, frankly, as a women's historian. She led a fascinating life, woven throughout with sadness and great joy. Juliet Low was an inveterate optimist, a bit eccentric, very intrepid, very courageous, also fun-loving, and, as it turned out, a phenomenal and visionary social reformer. So, let's learn about her from the very beginning. This is where she was born. Savannah, Georgia. I'm sure some of you may have been to her home in Savannah, Georgia. This is a little later picture, so that third floor wasn't there when she was born. 1860, Juliet Gordon Low was born just before the Civil War began. And this was her father, a Confederate veteran. Aww.
Stacey, are you controlling that?
How am I going backwards?
Stacey.
Use the side.
Yeah.
He wants me to use the side.
Just go down.
There. This was her father. He was a Confederate veteran, and he impressed upon his daughter the importance of duty. And I think he gave her that never say die attitude that comes from serving in the lost cause. Her mother was from the founding family of Chicago, and Nellie Kinsey Gordon taught her daughter the importance of giving back to a nation, a community that gave so much to her. In this couple, she saw a loving and devoted marriage at work. These two were dedicated to one another from the day they met until the day they died. She also gained a very clear understanding of the importance of religion to Nellie and to Willie, and this became important for her. Juliet Gordon Low was a devout Episcopalian. Her entire life, her religious faith was of supreme importance to her. Now, Juliet Low is the child in the back, the tallest one. Juliet Low was not the oldest daughter. She was not the youngest daughter. She was not a son. She was one of many children born to the Gordons. And Girl Scouts know her as Crazy Daisy. We know lots of stories that we tell around the campfire about Juliet Gordon Low's rather strange behavior. I'll just tell you one. She was young in Savannah, strangely cold night in Savannah, and Juliet Gordon was worried about the family cow. So, because she was a very kind-hearted girl, she went to the guest bedroom upstairs, and she took the blanket off the bed, ran downstairs in the dark, wrapped the cow in the blanket, secured the blanket, and then went to bed certain that the cow would be fine. Stunned the next morning to wake up and discover the blanket on the ground, trampled by the cow, and the cow just fine anyway. So there are a lot of Crazy Daisy stories, and most of them seem to me to have to do with how kind she is. But when she gets a little older here, she's 18, I noticed from researching the record that the Crazy Daisy stories begin to fade away. And what happens, I believe, is that as she ages and matures, she comes to have her own sense of herself. And she doesn't need to have this kind of crazy persona in the family anymore. I think Crazy Daisy worked for her as a girl because she carved out a niche for herself and her family this way. She was the one who could amuse. She was the one who could make things better with a joke, with a funny story. And I think this was a way to help her family through the hard times, and it gave her a secure position in the family. But as I said, when she got older, Crazy Daisy drops away. Now, when she is older, she meets these two women. Juliet Low had a very good education for her time. Her mother was a big fan of education for women. And so she went off to boarding school. She actually had quite a cosmopolitan existence because of her boarding school experiences up and down the East Coast. The woman on your left there is Abby Lippett Hunter, and on the right is Mary Gail Carter Clark. She was friends with these women until the very end. I pay particular attention to her friendships, partially as a women's historian, because that's what we do, and partially because I wanted to know how important friendships were to a woman who founded an organization based on making new friends and keeping the old. So what I discovered is these friendships were extraordinarily important to her, sustaining, in fact. This is the home that Juliet Gordon Low knew very well. This is Abby Lippett's home in Providence, Rhode Island. And the girls wound up here quite a bit. Now, this is Abby. Abby loved sports. If you've read my book already, you'll know that this is the one friend who is nicknamed the Icicle. She didn't like being called the Icicle, but she did have that New England reserve, and so this is where that appellation came from. Now, what I discovered about Abby, quite apart from her friendship with Juliet Low, is that Abby had a sister named Jenny who was profoundly deaf from scarlet fever at age 2. And Mrs. Lippett said, "I will teach my daughter to speak." Training for deaf children was in its infancy then, and the standard procedure was to teach sign language. But Mrs. Lippett said, "Sign language will be a wall between my daughter and all those hearing people, so I will teach her to speak." And so against all odds, Mrs. Lippett taught Jenny Lippett how to speak. And she was what we would today call mainstreamed or mainline, right? She went to a normal school, and she had a perfectly happy life. Now, I wonder what it means to Juliet Gordon Low to have a best friend's sister conquer her deafness in the language of the day, right? They all knew one another. They all hung out together. And so Juliet Low had an example of Jenny Lippett who had overcome her deafness. What did this mean? Maybe it was, at the very least, I think it was Juliet Low had an understanding of what profound deafness was. All right, this is Hyde Hall, and Hyde Hall is in Cooperstown, New York. It's the home of her other friend, Mary Gail Carter Clark. Mary Gail was very kind, very gentle woman, thwarted in love, but she also came from a family with a very deep vein of depression, perhaps bipolar disorder, it's hard to know. But suicidal tendencies ran in this family. Her father committed suicide, her sister committed suicide, she had a brother who was suicidal, Mary herself was suicidal. And so this was a very difficult but different kind of disability for the era. Juliet Low never abandoned Mary, and I think, again, another testimony to the importance of friendship despite odds. Well, this is Juliet Gordon Low's younger sister, Alice, and Alice died in 1880, just a little bit after the time that Mary's sister died. So here is Alice, passed away, a terrible tragedy for the family. It's the first break in the family circle, and Daisy is in the difficult position of having to mother her mother, because Mrs. Gordon has fallen apart. I can't imagine what it would be like to lose a child, and Mrs. Gordon was just brokenhearted. She had no time to take care of her other children. The eldest daughter, Eleanor, was abroad, so Daisy had to mother her mother, take care of her father, keep the household together. There was no one to look after Daisy. Enter the young man with whom she falls in love, despite the fact that her father said to her, "An honest man who has learned to work and support himself is preferable for a husband to a man born rich." Daisy fell in love with William Low, or as her father called him, the idle Englishman.